They say you never forget the moment your world stops spinning, and I reckon they're right. It wasn't a gunshot, a scream, or even a slammed door that did it for me. No, it was the hush. That eerie silence when you walk into your own home, and something feels wrong. The kind of wrong that don't smell like burnt supper or sound like broken dishes. It crawls up your spine like a cold hand, whispering that something sacred just got shattered. I remember that day like it was stitched into my skin. My shoes still wet from the rain, my Bible tucked under my arm from the ladies' retreat, and that faint scent of lavender from the church pew still clinging to my dress. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. But life, well, life has a funny way of pulling back the curtain before you're ready to see the stage. And there he was. My husband, the man I married when I was barely a woman, sitting in the center of our living room, wearing a red silk dress I didn't recognize. His legs crossed daintily, his lips curled into a smile I hadn't seen in years. And, Lord help me, he was perched right there. On Frank Delaney's lap, his boss, our church deacon, the man who shook my hand every Sunday like I was some kind of fool. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream, I couldn't even pray. All I could do, was stare. Tell me something, sugar. What does a woman do when everything she believed about her home, her husband, and her faith collapses in the blink of an eye? If you've ever had to choose between saving your pride or saving your soul, then maybe you'll understand what I did next. But before I open that old door wide, my dear, let me ask you to do one thing. Just one. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what I'm about to share isn't just a story. It's a confession. It's a wound. And maybe, just maybe, it's your story too. I was just a girl when I married Raymond Whitmore. 17, fresh out of high school, still smelled like cherry soda and yard daisy. He was 22, already working full-time at the paper mill on the far end of town. Tall, clean-cut, with eyes that didn't say much, but hands that always held mine just right. Folks said I was lucky, that I landed a steady man. And back in 1969, honey, that was worth more than passion or poetry. We settled in a small clapboard house on the edge of Hickory Hollow, just outside Jackson, Mississippi. Quiet place? Nothing fancy. Just 2 bedrooms, a narrow porch, and a kitchen with lemon yellow linoleum that never did quite stick down at the corners. But it was ours. He paid the bills. I cooked, cleaned, prayed, and tried not to feel that gnawing little ache that something was always missing. Our street smelled like cut grass and rusted mailboxes. The days crawled slow, like syrup in winter. On summer mornings, you could hear the cicadas buzzing before the sun even rose. The air was thick with humidity, and it'd wrap around your skin like wet cloth. I used to stand on that porch with a glass of sweet tea, swaying with the breeze, and pretending I was somewhere else. Maybe Nashville, maybe New Orleans. Anywhere but here. Raymond wasn't cruel. That's the part that makes it hard. He wasn't a drinker, didn't raise his voice, never laid a finger on me in anger, but he was, distant. Always was. Like he kept some part of himself locked up in a room I didn't have a key to. Sometimes he'd vanish into the garage for hours, tinkering with nothing, listening to soft jazz on that dusty old radio he never let me touch. I kept busy. Lord knows I did. Quilting circles at church, Sunday potlucks, volunteering at the thrift shop downtown. My best friend Mabel lived 2 doors down, and we'd sit on her porch for hours, talking about everything and nothing, slapping mosquitoes off our ankles and wondering why men are the way they are. And then there was Frank Delaney. His name alone makes my stomach tighten even now. He owned the feed store and the construction company in town. Had fingers in every pie, from church fundraising to local politics. Always dressed too fine for a man in Mississippi heat, silk ties and slick hair, and a smile that never touched his eyes. Folks respected him. I, never trusted him. He took a special interest in Raymond, promoted him fast, paid him well, called him his right hand. And yet, every time Frank's Cadillac pulled into our driveway, I'd get a chill. Like a storm was coming. Like something was about to snap. It was a humid September when the memory I'm about to tell y'all got burned into my bones. The kind of heat that makes your sheets stick to your back, and the flies don't even bother buzzing. The church ladies had planned a weekend retreat in Natchez prayers, worship music, homemade pies, and Bible study. I needed the break. I'd been feeling restless, heavy, and maybe deep down. I hoped a weekend with the Lord might patch the holes I couldn't name. Raymond kissed me on the cheek before I left. No warmth, just routine. His hand lingered on my shoulder, like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding my overnight bag, wondering if he'd notice if I just never came back. But I did. I came back. And baby, if I could go back and stop myself from opening that front door early, if I could tell that girl to turn around and never look back, maybe I would have. Maybe I would have spared her the sight that would haunt her for the next 40 years. But life doesn't give us do-overs, just stories. And this one, well, it starts with a storm on the horizon. Literally. The sky that Sunday turned a strange greenish gray, and thunder rumbled low like an old man groaning. I'd gotten a headache, one of those migraines that feel like your skull's trying to split in two. So I caught a ride home with Sister Joan and her grandson. Told Em I'd be fine. Told Em I just needed rest. But the Lord, ... Well, he was already staring the winds of truth. When I pulled into that gravel driveway, the house looked still. Too still. No lawnmower hum, no radio. Just the faint creak of the porch swing moving in the wind. I remember thinking, maybe he's out back. But the screen door was unlatched, and the smell of cologne, not his usual musk, but something sweeter, like roses and smoke, hung thick in the air. I stepped inside, and what I saw next, well, baby girl, we'll get to that soon enough. But first, tell me something. Have you ever loved someone so deep that when they broke you, it shattered not just your heart, but your sense of who you were? I wish I could tell you, I screamed. I wish I could say I stormed in there like a fury out of the Psalms, flipping chairs and throwing words like daggers. But the truth is, I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there, soaked to the bone from the rain, my hands still clutching the handles of my floral weekend bag, watching the scene unravel like it was a dream I was praying to wake up from. Raymond, my Raymond, he was wearing a red silk dress. Not a nightgown, not a robe. A full-on knee-length spaghetti strap, red silk dress, the kind Mabel used to call husband poison, meant for lipstick nights and sin. He had on pantyhose too. I could see the sheen on his calves, the lace peeking out at the top where the dress didn't quite fit right. His hair, which he'd always kept short, was brushed out and parted, tucked behind his ears with precision. There was lipstick smeared across his top lip, sloppily done, like a child playing with mama's makeup. And there sitting like royalty on my plaid armchair was Frank Delaney, still in his church suit, tie loosened, one hand resting on Raymond's thigh like he owned it, his other arm draped casually behind my husband's back. And Lord, help me, they were laughing like I wasn't real, like I was just some bad commercial interrupting their show. The click of the screen door behind me must have startled them. Raymond's head whipped around, and for one split second, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Fear, not of me, not of consequences, but fear of being seen, of being known. His face went pale, and his lips parted like he wanted to explain. But the words died in his throat. Frank didn't move, didn't flinch. He just looked at me with that smug, condescending smile he always wore when talking about those poor lost souls during Sunday sermon. Like he was above all this. Like I was the one interrupting some sacred moment. "Eleanor," he said, smooth as bourbon, "you're home early." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might knock the air right out of me. I felt a rush of heat crawl up my chest and face, not just rage, but shame. Like I had walked in on something dirty. Like I was the intruder in my own home. Raymond finally stood up, the hem of the dress swaying around his knees. He was barefoot. His wedding band, the one I'd put on his hand at that tiny Baptist church decades ago, still gleamed under the lamplight. But everything else about him looked unfamiliar, foreign, like a stranger had crawled into my husband's skin. "Ellie," he stammered. It's not what you think." I let out a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a cry, just this dry, broken cough of disbelief. I took a step back. My heels caught on the rug. I nearly fell. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't you dare lie to me?" He took a step forward, arms outstretched like he thought he could gather me in, fix this with a hug. I flinched, not out of fear, but out of fury. "How long?" I asked. Silence. I said it again, louder. "How long, Raymond?" He dropped his arms, lowered his head, didn't answer. And Frank, that smug son of a preacher, had the audacity to speak. "Eleanor," he said, like I was being unreasonable, "we didn't mean for you to find out this way. This way. As if there was ever a good way to find your husband cross-dressing on another man's lap. A man who'd baptized your niece, no less." I turned and walked out. I don't remember grabbing my car key. Don't remember starting the ignition. All I know is that I was driven down Highway 18 with the windows rolled down, the rain soaking my hair, and my own breath in so loud it drowned out the gospel station on the radio. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just kept driven, past the diner, past the church, past the fields where kids used to play baseball in the summer. Every light blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. Every memory I'd built with him cracked like ice beneath my tires. How long had he been hiding this? Was it just the dress? Or was there more? Did he ever love me? Or was I just a mask he wore? I pulled into Mabel's driveway sometime near midnight. She opened the door in her nightgown and curlers, took one look at my face, and, without a word, wrapped me in her arms. That night, I slept on our couch. And I didn't dream. I just laid there, waiting for the pain to begin. I didn't go back home for 4 days. Not because I was afraid. I wasn't. I was ashamed. Not of him. Not really. But of me. Ashamed that I hadn't seen it. Ashamed that I'd let myself be fooled. Ashamed that somehow, deep down, I thought this might have been my fault. The devil loves to twist a woman's heart like that. Makes her think if she'd been prettier, more adventurous, less strict, more affectionate, less her, maybe he wouldn't be wandered. Maybe he wouldn't be needed someone else. Someone different. Mabel tried to talk sense into me. Said Ellie, "Baby, this ain't on you. Grown men make their own choices. You didn't put him in that dress?" I nodded, smiled, drank the tea she poured me. But in the dark, when she'd gone to bed and the house fell still, I'd curl up on that lumpy couch, blanket up to my chin, and cry like I did when I lost Mama. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out all the soft parts of me and left only the shell. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the replacement. Raymond had always been quiet, but he was mine. Or I thought he was. He held my hand during Rev Clark's sermons, even when his palms got sweaty. He kissed me on the cheek before work. He helped me plant tomatoes every spring. Now, all that felt like a lie. And Frank? That snake. The thought of him, smug and composed, touching my husband like he owned him, it made my stomach churn, made my skin crawl. And yet, I couldn't stop picturing it. That silk dress, that room, their laughter, the lipstick. I started questioning everything. Was he ever truly mine? Did he ever love me the way I loved him? Was I just a disguise he wore, like that dress, to pass as something he wasn't? The grief settled in my bones, slow and heavy. I walked through Mabel's house like a ghost. I folded laundry that wasn't mine, washed dishes I didn't dirty, just to do something, just to feel real. On the 3rd day, I opened my Bible. Not to read, just to hold it. It opened to Psalms. Psalm 6, verse 6. I am weary with my groaning. All the night make I my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. I closed it, held it against my chest, and cried. That night, Raymond called. Mabel answered. "He wants to talk," she said, covering the receiver with her hand. I shook my head. She nodded, but not in agreement, in understanding. She hung up. He called again and again. Left messages, apology, excuses. I never meant to hurt you. It was just part of me I couldn't explain. You were always good to me. I still love you. But love doesn't hide in shadows. Love doesn't wear masks. And love sure as heaven don't leave a woman curled on another woman's couch wondering if she ever mattered. I stopped going to church. Couldn't face the whispers. Couldn't face him. Frank sat in the front pew that Sunday, bold as brass, singing hymns like he wasn't the reason I stayed in bed with the curtains drawn. No one said a word. But I saw the eyes, saw the looks. Some pitied me. Some judged me. Some seemed to already know. That cut the deepest, because in a small town, secrets don't stay buried. They just get passed around in whispers and casseroles. And no one had come to warn me. No one. I started questioning God then, too. How could he let this happen? How could he let a woman who gave her life to home-making, to honor, to church, get blindsided like this? But God don't always shout, "Child." Sometimes he just waits for you to fall apart, so he can start rebuilding. I wasn't ready for that yet. I was still breaking, still bleeding, still wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. But in the middle of that storm, I heard a whisper. Not from Raymond, not from Frank, not even from Mabel, from somewhere deeper, softer, wiser. It said, "You are not what he did to you. You are not what he hid from you. You are still mine." And in that stillness, I felt the first thread of strength, pulling me back toward myself. It didn't happen all at once. Sugar. Healing never does. There's no light switch that flips the pain off. No hymn that undoes betrayal. Sometimes, the turning point isn't a shout. It's a whisper, barely loud enough for even your own soul to hear. For me, it started with a pale blue dress. Not his. Mine. I'd been sleeping on Mabel's old pull-out sofa for days. The springs groaned every time I turned in my sleep, and the musty smell of her lilac-scented throw pillows clung to my hair. But somehow, even with the aches and the silence, I felt safer there than I did in the house I'd built with Raymond. That morning, the sun poured in softer than usual. Not blazing like most Mississippi mornings. It was shy, gentle, almost as if the good Lord was saying, "Take a breath, baby girl." I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. And, Lord have mercy, I didn't even recognize myself. Puffy eyes, unbrushed hair, Shoulders slumped like I was carrying the weight of every secret I never asked for. I didn't cry. Not right then. I just stared at the woman in the glass and whispered, "I don't know who you are anymore." That's when Mabel walked in, quiet as a cat, holding a hanger draped in something soft. She didn't say a word at first, just looked at me with those kind eyes of hers. Then, as she laid the dress on the edge of the couch, she said, "You forgot your beautiful Eleanor. Let me help you remember." It was her Sunday best from way back when, a powder blue dress with white stitching on the collar, delicate and sweet. She brushed my hair like Mama used to do when I was a little girl, then fastened a pair of her pearl clip-ons to my ears. I hadn't worn earrings in months, maybe longer, but they made me feel like I had a place in the world again. We didn't go to our regular cafe that day. She drove us across town to a diner nobody knew us in. The waitress didn't ask questions, just poured our coffee and smiled. I ordered fried green tomatoes and hush puppies. Mabel got meatloaf. We didn't speak much until dessert. That's when she looked at me and asked, "What now, Ellie?" I didn't answer right away, just stirred my iced tea and listened to the ice clink against the glass. That question echoed louder than any sermon I'd ever heard. What now? Go back to that house. Pretend I hadn't seen what I saw. Put my apron back on and act like my heart hadn't been ripped from my chest? No, ma'am. I couldn't live like that. I needed something, anything, to feel like mine. Not borrowed, not shared, not twisted into someone else's lie. That very afternoon, I asked Mabel to drive me to the Jackson Public Library. Walking through those big glass doors felt like crossing a bridge. My hands were shaken, but my spine was straight. I walked up to the front desk and asked for the manager. Her name was Miss Karen, wore her gray hair in a bun, and had readers hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. I told her I'd been a housewife for 35 years, that I hadn't worked outside the home since I was 17, that I loved books, and that I needed a job, not for the money, but for my mind. She didn't flinch, just smiled and said, "We could use someone like you." I nearly cried right there, surrounded by dusty shelves and a group of toddlers giggling in the children's section. A week later, I was wearing a name tag, Mrs. Whitmore, library assistant, and honey, I wore it like armor. I learned the Dewey Decimal System, reshelved novels with care, and helped old folks sign up for their first email accounts. My hands, once used to scrubbing floors and rolling pie dough, now touched spines of books that smelled like history and hope. Each morning, I passed by the courthouse steps, and every time, I paused, not to look for Raymond, not to wonder about Frank, but to whisper to myself, "You're still standin', Ellie." Raymond's letters came like clockwork. First, every other day, then every week. His words were lined with guilt. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. I still love you." He said Frank was gone, said he wanted to talk, said he missed our life. But not once did he ask how I was. Not once did he mention the look in my eyes the moment I walked in on him. It was always about his shame, his confusion, his needs. So I stopped opening the letters. I tucked them in a box and slid it under the bed at Mabel's. If he couldn't see me, truly see me, then his words had no place in my hands. Instead, I started journaling. Every night after work, I'd sit by Mabel's front window with a cup of chamomile and pour my thoughts into a little leather notebook. At first, they were sharp, jagged, full of questions I didn't dare speak aloud. Was I ever enough? Was it all a lie? What now? But then, something shifted. Slowly, the entries changed. Today, a little girl hugged me for helping her find a princess book. Today, I smiled at myself in the mirror and didn't look away. Today, I chose peace and child. That's when I knew that was the moment. The turning point. Not a bang, not a confrontation, not a courtroom scene. Just a woman sitting by a window, telling the truth to a page. A quiet return to myself, one line at a time. You ever feel like your body's moving forward, but your spirit's still sitting on the floor somewhere, staring at a wall that cracked the day your heart broke? That was me. A full month had passed since the night I found Raymond Weir in that red silk dress, nestled in the lap of the man who once baptized my niece. I'd gotten real good at putting on a brave face, showing up to the library, alphabetizing shelves, smiling at the children who came in for story time. I even wore lipstick some days. But, baby, inside, I was still walking through fog. And then came the envelope. It was a Tuesday, humid, the kind of southern heat that clings to your back and makes the air feel heavy with sea. Miss Karen handed me the mail and said, "This one's got your name on it, hun. No return address, just my full name. Eleanor May Whitmore, written in Raymond's shaky print." I nearly tossed it straight into the bin. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me slip it into my purse instead. That night, after I'd poured myself some chamomile and settled under the window lamp, I opened it. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The letter was short, just 5 lines. "Ellie, I know I hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you'll believe I never meant to make you feel small. This is who I am. I hid it for decades. I'm tired of hiding. I hope one day you'll see me. Not just what I did, but who I am. Raymond and the photo. It was of him, alone, this time. Standing in front of our old magnolia tree, wearing a soft cream dress, his posture proud, not ashamed. But there was sadness in his eyes, a kind I hadn't seen before. I stared at that photo for a long time. My fingers trembled, not out of rage, but because I realized something. He wasn't asking to come back. He was asking to be seen. And sugar, that was the moment the final crack in my heart let in a bit of light. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't ready to sit across from him. Wasn't ready to forgive. But I did see him. And that hurt in a whole new way. Because now I had to decide who I was going to be. The wife left behind, the betrayed, or a woman who could rise even when the world around her shifted under her feet. The next morning, I put on my nicest blouse, the cream one with the lace collar. Mabel asked where I was going. I just said, home. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I opened the door, stepped into the kitchen, and it hit me. The smell. Old cologne. Dust. Faint perfume. Too. Not mine. And silence. Not the comforting kind. The hollow kind. Like memories had packed up and moved out. I walked through each room, slow. Ran my fingers along the old dining table. Touched the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. Past the mirror where I used to fix my hair before church. Everything felt ... paused. Until I got to the bedroom. That's where I found it. A shoebox. On top. A folded piece of paper. My name on it. Inside. Dresses. Scarves. A pair of red heels. Lipstick. Jewelry. A journal. His. And at the bottom, tucked between a silk blouse and a copy of Leaves of Grass. Our wedding photo. I sat on the bed and held that photo in my lap. We looked so young. So sure. But now, I knew, even back then, he was hiding. And I was trying to hold a man I didn't really know. I cried, baby. Not loud, not messy, just tears that ran hot and steady. Because grieving someone who's still alive, that's a special kind of pain. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I wrote him back. Raymond, I don't understand all of it. I don't know if I ever will. But I see now that you were wearing masks for longer than I realized. And I can't carry both our truths anymore. So I'm setting mine down here. I'm leaving the house. You can have it. I'm starting over. I wish you peace. Eleanor, I sealed it. Left it on the bed with the photo. Walked out that door, barefoot, feeling the wood beneath my feet for the first time in years. And honey, I didn't look back. Not because I hated him, but because I was done being a shadow in someone else's life. That was the day I stopped surviving and started living. It's a strange thing. Human back to yourself after years of living as someone's echo. It's like waking up in your own skin, feeling how it sags in places, how it carries stories in its folds, and asking softly, is this really me? The morning after I left the letter on the bed and walked out of that house barefoot, I didn't feel strong. I felt empty, like every emotion had been wrung out of me and left to dry on a clothesline of memories I didn't want anymore. But child, emptiness can be holy ground, a blank space for something new to grow. I moved in with Mabel full-time for a while. She cleared out the sewing room and gave me her old iron-framed bed, the one with the creaky springs and pink quilt stitched by her mama back in '52. It was like sleeping in a story, one that didn't belong to Raymond, or Frank, or shame. The library became more than just a job. It was my daily salvation. Every morning, I'd unlock the front doors, take a deep breath, and say hello to silence. Not the haunted kind, but the soft, inviting kind. The kind that waits patiently for you to speak. And I started speaking. In little ways. I organized a new shelf for women who walked away. Books written by women who left bad marriages, cults, careers, cities, families, all for the chance to find who they were without the weight of expectations. I'd run my fingers across the spines like I was meeting sisters I never knew I had. There was one book, especially, that stopped me in my tracks. It was called This Body Is Mine. Memoir. Quiet, fierce. I read it in one night, curled on the couch with the lamp burning low and Mabel snoring in the other room. That book cracked me open, because it wasn't just about loving a man. It was about loving the version of yourself you were told to be. And Lord, did that hit home? For most of my life, I'd been Mrs. Raymond Whitmore, church lady, Southern wife, quiet backbone, good cook, modest dresser, prayer warrior, always smiling at potlucks even when my chest felt hollow. But who was Eleanor May without the last name? That was the question that kept me up at night now. Not the betrayal. Not the dress. Not the laughter between him and Frank, but the emptiness I'd never dared to fill before. I started wearing colors. I used to avoid mustard yellow, burnt orange, deep plump tie. Let my hair grow longer and wavier than Raymond ever liked. I bought myself a pair of red flats. Not heels, not modest black pumps, just soft, red shoes that made me feel alive when I walked. And I started talking again to God. Not the way I used to. Not begging for answers. Just sitting still, letting my pain breathe in his presence. And slowly, I felt him whisper back, "You are still mine." Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't all brave steps and library days. There were nights when I'd lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow, wondering if I'd ever feel truly whole again. Some Sundays, I skipped church. Couldn't bear the way folks looked at me, pity mixed with gossip. Couldn't stand singing hymns while Frank sat there with his smug hands folded like he hadn't set fire to a woman's home. One day, I saw him in the grocery store. Aisle 6. Canned vegetables. He smiled like we were old friends. I didn't smile back. I walked right past him, my heels clicking on that floor, my shoulders back. He didn't follow. And just like that, I realized I owed him nothing. Not a look, not a greeting, not a single thread of the grace I was working so hard to sew back into my own life. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I chose silence. Not because I was weak, but because I've wasted too many words on men who don't hear women unless they're hurting." You see, baby, when you start reclaiming your own peace, folks will say, "You're changing." They're right. But what they don't understand is that some changes come from coming home to yourself, not running away. I joined a poetry group at the library, started writing again. Real stuff, not just journals. I read my first piece out loud at a women's night downtown. My voice shook, my hands trembled. But when I finished, the room was still. Then came the applause. And Lord, it wasn't just clapping. It was affirmation. I was becoming somebody new, not spiteful, not bitter, just free. And that child was the consequence of my liberation. Not revenge, not vindication, but peace. You know, baby, sometimes God don't send storms to destroy your house. Sometimes he sends them to tear the roof off so you can finally see the sky. And once I saw it, that big, wide-open Mississippi sky, stretching above me like a second chance, I knew I couldn't go back to living small. I'd already mourned the life I lost. What I needed now was to plant something new in the ashes. It started with a garden. Now, don't laugh, sugar. I know it sounds simple, but after spending decades tending to other folks' needs, to a husband's shirts, 2 casseroles for church, 2 wounds I wasn't allowed to name, putting my hands in the dirt felt like claiming my own little piece of the earth. Mabel gave me a patch of her backyard. It wasn't big, but it had good sun and soft soil. I bought myself a pair of gloves with tiny sunflowers stitched on the cuffs, and a set of tools from the thrift store that still had dirt from someone else's past life on M. That didn't bother me none. There's a kind of beauty in reusing what others threw out. I planted tomatoes, green beans, and okra first. Then I added lavender for peace, rosemary for remembrance, and marigolds, because I remembered Mama saying they kept away the bad spirit. Whether that was true or not, they made the garden shine. Each morning before work, I'd walk out with my coffee in hand and talk to those plants like they were old friends. I'd kneel in the dirt, pressing my palms into the earth, whispering prayers I didn't have words for, just human my way through the pain, letting the sun warm my back while I waited for something, anything, to grow. And it did. Slowly, tenderly, like me. People started noticing the change in me too. Miss Karen said I had a different light in my eyes. The children at the library started bringing me drawings. One little girl gave me a crayon picture of a lady in a long blue dress with sparkles in her hair. She said, "It's you, Miss Ellie, 'cause you look like magic now." Lord, that about undid me. But the biggest change came when I met June. June was a retired nurse who'd moved down from North Carolina to be closer to her sister. She was tall, wore overalls over flowy cotton shirts, and had hair like silver feathers that danced in the wind. We met at the Saturday farmer's market. She was buying lemon balm, and I was selling jars of my homemade okra pickles, a hobby I'd picked up when the harvest came in faster than I could fry. She struck up conversation like we'd known each other in a past life, talked about soil like it was poetry. And when I told her I was new to gardening, she said, "Honey, it ain't about what you know. It's about what you're willing to learn." We started meeting every Sunday afternoon in Mabel's backyard. She'd bring seeds, I'd bring iced tea, and we'd dig side by side in the sun. Sometimes we talked about nothing, other times about everything. I told her about Raymond, not the whole thing, not at first, just bits and pieces, like when you test bathwater with your toes before climbing in. She listened without blinking, didn't flinch, didn't pity me. She just said, "You don't owe anyone your silence, Eleanor, not even your past self." That night, I wrote that down in my journal, underlined it twice, and slowly, I found myself telling more about the red dress, the betrayal, the hollow ache that came after, about the shame that clung to me like smoke, even though I hadn't lit the match. June looked me right in the eye and said, "You were faithful. He wasn't. That's on him. But what you do next, that's yours." God, I needed to hear that, because the truth was, for all the freedom I'd claimed, there was still a little voice in me whispering that I'd failed. Failed as a wife, as a woman, as a believer. But that voice was wrong. And with each seed I planted, each weed I pulled, each laugh I shared with June over a spilled watering can or a crooked row of carrots, I was droning that voice out with truth. One day in late October, I stood at the edge of the garden, hands on my hips, staring at what we'd built. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. And so was I. I let the sun hit my face, closed my eyes, and whispered a thank you. Not to Raymond, not to Frank, not even to June, but to God, for letting me break just enough to start again. And for making sure I had people, and dirt, and a garden to help me rise. You know, there's a certain kind of quiet a woman learns to live in when she's been told for years that her peace depends on keeping things gentle, soft, small. Don't speak too loud. Don't cry too long. Don't ask too many questions. I had lived in that quiet for decades. It wrapped around my ribs like a corset, tight, polite, and slowly suffocant. But grief. Grief has a funny way of stretching a woman's lungs. And one day, I woke up and realized I didn't want to whisper anymore. It started with a poetry night at the library. Miss Karen had been organizing local events to bring more folks in. Book swaps, history talks, even a crafts night where we all tried and failed to knit socks for charity. But this one Friday, she put a sign-up sheet in the break room. Open mic night theme. Rebirth. I stared at it for a week. My name didn't go down. I told myself I had nothing to say. That my story wasn't poetry. It was too jagged, too personal, too messy. But then, one afternoon while reorganizing the Southern fiction section, I found a little book with faded gold letters across the cover. The Brave Women Speak. I flipped it open and found this line on the first page. Your voice is not too much. The room just wasn't big enough. It stopped me cold. I ran my fingers over the words, felt them like they were stitched into my chest. That night, I went home, sat under Mabel's porch light with my journal, and started writing. The words came like tears. Not rushed, not loud, just steady. Line after line poured out of me like I was pulling thread from a needle that had been waiting for years to be used again. I wrote about the dress, about the moment I walked in, about the way silence had choked me louder than any scream. I wrote about picking myself up, barefoot and bruised, and walking out of that house, about the dirt under my nails from plantain peace, about June's voice in my ear saying, "You don't owe anyone your silence." And when I was done, I folded that page in half, and I signed up. When the night came, I wore a cotton blouse the color of sunflower petals and my red flats. I brought Mabel and June with me, and they sat in the front row, eyes bright, hands warm. There were other women read in. To a teacher, a single mama, an artist who'd battled cancer, each story like a lantern in the dark. But when my name was called, Sugar, I almost couldn't stand. My knees were jelly, my mouth dry as the summer dirt. But I walked up there anyway. I unfolded the paper, cleared my throat, and I said, "My name is Eleanor May Whitmore. I was married at 17. I loved a man who didn't know how to love me back. I walked in on him wearing silk and sittin' in the lap of his boss, and it broke me. But I'm here now, not as his wife, not as a victim, but as a woman who learned that silence protects shame, and voice brings light." I read the whole thing. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. And when I finished, there was silence. Then applause. Then tears, not just mine. 3 women came up afterward and hugged me like I was their sister. One said, "You told my story." Another whispered, "I've never said it out loud, but now I think I could." That night, I walked home lighter than I'd felt in years. It wasn't just about the poem. It was about the power of telling the truth, raw, unfiltered, and without apology. And I didn't stop there. The library asked me to start a monthly circle for women's stories. I called it the Porch Light Session. We met every third Thursday, sat in a ring of old chairs, drank sweet tea, and took turns telling the truths we were never given space to share. Some were soft, some were sharp, but all were sacred. In that circle, I met Linda, a preacher's wife, who found a letter that shattered her world. I met Teresa, who left a 30-year marriage when she finally admitted she was in love with someone else, and always had been. I met young women, older women, widows, survivors, truth-tellers, and secret keepers, all holding pieces of stories they thought they'd die with. And together, we gave those stories breath. June started bringing her guitar, played slow songs while we read, Sometimes, I'd hum along. Other times, I'd just close my eyes and listen. Let the music wrap around my pain like a shawl. That's when I started writing again. Not just poems, letters. Letters to myself, to my younger self, to the girl who married too young, to the woman who stayed too long, to the soul who survived. One night, I wrote, "You are not the silence he left behind. You are not the room you kept shrinking in. You are the voice that bloomed in the dark. And sugar, that voice, it's mine now. And I'll never give it up again." By the time the leaves started changing in Hickory Hollow, I had already shed 3 lifetimes. The first was the girl who believed love meant sacrificing yourself till there was nothing left. The second was the wife who watched her marriage unravel in red silk. And the third was the woman who stayed silent because she thought her pain wasn't loud enough to matter. Now, in this new skin, this softer, braver skin, I was learning how to simply be. To breathe without asking permission. To take up space without shrinking. To stand in front of the mirror and smile. Not because I was perfect, but because I was still here. And that's when he showed up. Not Raymond. Lord, no. This was someone else. His name was Samuel Hart. Folks just called him Sam. He was 62, a retired literature professor from Jackson State who'd moved back to care for his elderly mother. We met at a community reading I hosted at the library, a night where folks shared their favorite passages from books that saved them. He read from Walt Whitman, would you believe? Same poet whose pages I once found in Raymond's hidden box. But the way Sam read those lines, slow, steady, like prayer, it didn't stir pain in me. It stirred peace. After the event, he approached me at the cookie table. "Your voice," he said, "it's honest. Doesn't flinch." I laughed, blushing like a schoolgirl. "Well," I said, "I've flinched plenty. I just finally got tired of ducking." He chuckled. Not loud, but warm. The kind that settles in your bones. We started talking about books. About Southern history. About front porches and long summers, and the way grief feels like humidity clinging to your skin when you least expect it. Sam didn't push, didn't pry. He just listened. And Lord, I didn't realize how much I needed that. After years of trying to decode silence, it was holy to be heard. At first, I kept my distance. I was polite, friendly, guarded. But then, he showed up to my women's circle. Not to speak, but to help set up chairs. He brought lemon pound cake and asked if it was all right to sit in the back and listen. Some of the ladies raised eyebrows, but I saw something in his eyes. Not curiosity, not pity. Respect. He never interrupted, never corrected. He just nodded, took notes, and afterward helped us fold tablecloths, like it was the most natural thing in the world. One Thursday, after the circle, he walked me to my car. We stood under the glow of the streetlight, cicadas humming in the trees. "I know you've been through a lot," he said gently, "and I don't expect anything. But if you'd ever like to sit and talk, not about pain, just about life, I'd be honored." I nodded, not ready to say yes, but not wanting to say no, either. It was a few weeks later when I invited him over for coffee. Not at Mabel's by then. I had my own little rental near the river, with a porch just big enough for 2 rocking chairs and a pot of mums. We sat there sipping quietly, watching the sky turn the color of peaches and cream. He didn't try to impress me, didn't talk about himself too much, just sat there, letting the silence stretch like warm dough. That's when I realized this was love. Not fireworks, not hunger, not desperation, but presence. A love that didn't ask me to disappear. Didn't need me to be smaller to make him feel bigger. Didn't come with demands or conditions or borrowed shame. Just companionship, warmth, a hand resting gently on the table between us. Not reaching, not clinging, just there. One evening, as we packed up after a library event, he offered me a ride home. I almost said no, out of habit, out of fear. But I looked at his face, lined with kindness, and said, "All right, just don't drive like you're late to church." He grinned. Wouldn't dare. I haven't been to church since my beard was black. On the ride, we passed the old road to my old house, the one I shared with Raymond. I looked away, out the passenger window, and felt the ache rise like smoke. Sam didn't ask, didn't point, just turned the radio down and said, "I can pull over if you need to breathe." And that, baby, that was the moment I knew I could trust him. Not because he filled the silence, but because he honored it. We didn't start anything official. Not at first. I wasn't ready to wear anyone's name again. I told him that plain. "I don't need a title," he said. "Just your time." So we built a quiet kind of love. Garden walks, Sunday pie. Late night calls just to say, "Did you see the moon tonight?" He never tried to fix me. Never asked me to explain what I'd survived. He just made space for me to live in my own story. Fully, freely, unafraid. And baby girl, after all I'd been through, that was more than enough. I used to think love was about starting over, Like if you just loved someone new, it would somehow wipe the slate clean, scrub the past away like a chalkboard after Sunday school. But what I've come to learn, baby, is that love, real love, don't erase nothin'. It holds you with your past, not in spite of it. It was a cool November afternoon when I felt that truth settle in my bones. The leaves had turned every shade of fire, and the town smelled like cinnamon and burnt wood. Sam and I were sitting on my little porch, watching the sun slide behind the trees like it was shy. He was reading aloud from a book, something old, worn, and poetic. His voice had this way of mackin', even sad words feel warm. And I was knittin', though truth be told, I was unravelin' more than I was mackin'. That old yarn kept getting tangled. We sat like that for a while. No rush, no noise, just the easy rhythm of companionship. And then he looked over at me, real gentle-like, and said, "Do you ever miss him?" The question didn't hit me like a slap. It came soft, like rain on an old tin roof. I didn't answer right away, just set down my needles and looked out at the sky. Did I miss Raymond? Not the betrayal? Not the secrets? Not the silence? But I missed the way he'd hum when he shaved. I missed the rhythm of his boots on the porch. I missed the man I thought I knew. So I nodded. Sometimes, I said, I think I miss the version of him I believed in. The man I thought I married. Sam didn't flinch, didn't look threatened or small. He just said, "That makes sense." No jealousy, no guilt, just grace. That night, I cried. Not the way I used to, not loud, not broken, just slow tears. The kind that fall when grief finally gets permission to sit at the table with peace. Because love like that, love that sees your scars and doesn't try to cover them, that's the kind of love you plant roots in. Sam never tried to compete with my past. Never acted like he had to be better than Raymond. He didn't need to be the one. He just wanted to be here now. In this chapter, in whatever story I was still writing, he'd say things like, "You're allowed to carry what came before." And Lord, after spending so long feeling like my pain had to be buried deep where no one could see it, that kind of love felt like breath and underwater for the first time. We'd go for long walks by the river some evenings, just talking. Sometimes we wouldn't even speak, just walking in rhythm, serene silence, like a blanket. One time, we passed by a thrift shop, and I stopped cold in front of the window. There was a red silk dress hanging behind the glass, just like the one I found on Raymond that day. Same cut, same sheen, same memory wrapped in satin. Sam noticed my breath catch. He didn't say a word, just took my hand. I didn't cry, didn't panic. I just looked. And then I said, "It doesn't haunt me like it used to." He gave my hand a squeeze and said, "That's 'cause you already walked through the fire." We kept walking. And in that moment, I realized the past wasn't gone. It was stitched into my skin, into my steps, into my story. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It was history, not baggage. I started talking more openly in my women's circle about that part of the story. Not just the pain, but the grief behind the anger. The love that lingered long after the betrayal. The strange, quiet compassion that sometimes surprised me when I remembered Raymond not as the man who broke me, but as the man who was broken himself. Some folks didn't understand that. They wanted me to stay mad, to hold tight to the wound. But I couldn't do that and still grow. You can't plant new roots in scorched earth. You have to till it, cry into it, forgive it. Not forget, but forgive, so something can bloom. Sam brought me seeds that spring, real ones, wrapped in brown paper, zinnias, sweet peas, wildflowers. We planted them together in the soft soil behind my house. I told him about the first time Raymond ever brought me flowers, just daisies from a roadside stand, wrapped in newspaper. I laughed, remembering how I pressed one in my Bible and forgot it was there till years later. Sam smiled and said, "Let's press these ones too. Not to forget, but to remember that you lived. And that, baby, that's what love looks like after the ashes. Not a fresh start, but a deeper one. One that knows you, all of you, and stays." There's a moment, sugar, somewhere between sorrow and peace, when you catch your reflection in a mirror, not expecting much, and suddenly you see yourself, not the woman you were, not the woman you had to be, but the one you fought like hell to become. That moment came for me on a Tuesday morning. The kettle was whistling, the kitchen window fogged with steam, and I was humming a hymn I hadn't thought of in years, something Mama used to sing while hanging clothes out on the line. The sun spilled soft and golden across the floor, and I caught a glimpse of myself in the little mirror above the sink. I paused, tilted my head, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled at the woman looking back. Not because she was flawless, not because she had it all figured out, but because I recognized her. She wasn't the girl who'd begged a man to love her. She wasn't the wife who'd mistaken silence for loyalty. She wasn't the ghost walking through a house full of lies. She was Eleanor Mayhole, gentle, fierce in her quiet way. And Lord, didn't it feel like human home to myself? That week, I cleared out the last of my boxers. Old things I'd carried with me out of the house I'd once shared with Raymond. Letters I no longer needed. A wedding dress that smelled like mothballs and memory. I donated the dress to a local theater group. Told M maybe someone else could make something new from it. It didn't feel like losing a piece of me. It felt like letting go of a costume I didn't fit in anymore. At the library, I started teaching a class called Women Who Rewrite Themselves. We read stories about second chances, memoirs, poems, short fiction, but more than that, we wrote our own. I watched women, some barely 30, some over 70, pick up pens and rediscover themselves word by word. One of the ladies, Miss Irma, came up to me after class and said, "I used to think I peaked at 35, but now I think I'm just getting started." And I told her, "Baby, flowers bloom when they're ready, not when folks expect." That became our motto. I started wearing what I wanted to. Long patterned skirts, bold earrings. I painted my nails with soft pink polish and let my curls go wild some days, just to remind myself I didn't owe neatness to anyone. Sam, bless him, never once tried to shape me. He just loved me as I was. Messy days, quiet days, days where I didn't want to talk at all. He'd sit beside me on the porch and just be there. That kind of love don't come from fairy tales, baby. That's the kind that's built one brick at a time, with honesty and space and time. One day, he said, "You look different lately." I raised an eyebrow. Older, he smiled. Lighter. And Lord, wasn't that the truth? Not lighter like something was missing, but lighter like I'd finally set down what wasn't mine to carry. Raymond's last letter came in early spring. He'd moved north, started a new life, said he was living openly now, and that he hoped I was happy. I read it. I cried a little. Then I folded it up, placed it gently in my journal, and wrote beneath it, "I release you. I forgive you. But most of all, I forgive myself for ever thinking I had to fix you." That, baby, that was freedom. Mabel threw me a "You're finally you" party that May. Just a handful of friends, sweet tea, lemon bars, and Sam playing soft tunes on his old guitar. They gave me a little plaque that said, "She bloomed anyway." I hung it above my bed. Every night I'd look at it and whisper, "Yes, I did." You see, becoming yourself again after years of bending to fit other folks' shapes. It ain't loud. It ain't fast. It's in the quiet decisions. The first no that don't come with guilt. The first yes that comes from your gut, not obligation. The first day you wake up and don't feel broken, just beautifully unfinished. I started writing my story for real then. Not just journal pages and poems, but a book. Mabel said, "You better finish it before you turn 80. I laughed and told her, "Even if I finish it at 90, it'll be right on time. Because who I am now, sugar. She's not a comeback. She's a becoming. And Lord, don't it feel good to finally belong to yourself? They say when a woman finds her voice, she can't help but lift the voices around her. And child, after everything I walked through, everything I lost, everything I found, there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to keep my light to myself. It started small, like most things that matter. One night after our women's circle at the library, a young woman named Tessa lingered by the cookie table. She couldn't feed Ben more than 23 tiny thing, barely speaking above a whisper, holding her paper like it weighed 100 pounds. I asked her, "You writin' tonight, sweetheart?" She bit her lip. I was gonna read, but it's stupid. I leaned in close, real gentle, and said, "Baby, if it's yours, it ain't stupid. You're not stupid, and you don't need to be perfect, just honest." She stared at me a moment, then nodded. That night, she read a piece about living, an engagement to a man who made her feel like wallpaper, invisible, replaceable, decorative. And when she finished, the room was quiet. Not awkward quiet, sacred quiet. The kind of stillness that says, "We see you, we hear you, we're with you." That's when I knew what we'd built, what I'd survived, wasn't just for me. It was a map, a lantern, a hand outstretched behind me for the next woman still finding her way in the dark. So I took it further. I started a new series at the library called Letters to the Woman I Was. Each month, we gathered with notebooks and tea, and we wrote to our younger selves, the ones who stayed too long, believed too little in their own worth, gave too much, bent too far. It was hard, at first. Some couldn't write a word. Others wrote pages and wept through every line. But over time, those letters turned into healing. One woman, Gloria, wrote, "You didn't fail for loving him. You only failed yourself when you stopped loving you." Another, Marianne, wrote, "Dear girl, you were never too loud. They just weren't ready for your truth." And me, I wrote, "Eleanor, I'm proud of you. Not for surviving, but for choosing joy when bitterness would have been easier. We printed those letters, bound M in little booklets, and left M in the library's community section, tucked between cookbooks and magazine, waiting for the next soul to stumble upon M like a love note from a stranger. And, wouldn't you know it, women started leaving their own letters behind. Folded notes, scribbled prayers, drawings, poems. They called it the whisper wall, a quiet space where women spoke their truth without fear. Some days I'd sit there before closing and read one or two. They weren't always pretty, but they were real. And Lord, realness is holy. One afternoon, a woman in her 60s, curly gray hair, hands that trembled when she held her pen, asked if I could stay after the circle. She pulled a folded napkin from her purse and handed it to me. Inside was a letter that read, "I watched your story online. My husband also lived a double life. I've never said it out loud, till now. Thank you for macking it, survivable." I hugged her, didn't say a word, just held her while she shook. Sometimes, silence is the greatest kindness we can offer. That night, I sat on my porch with Sam and told him, I think this is what I was meant to do. Not just survive, but show others how. He looked at me, eyes soft with that deep kind of love. The kind that ain't about possession, but witnessing. And he said, "You're more than a survivor, Ellie. You're a lighthouse." I wept. Then, not from pain, from purpose. Because when I was at my lowest, all I wanted was for someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't broken beyond repair. Now I got to be that voice, that hand on a back, that quiet yes in a world full of no. We started holding retreats, just weekends, simple, in a borrowed cabin near a lake. Women would bring notebooks, comfortable shoes, and hearts held together with string. We'd write, cry, dance, pray, laugh till our bellies hurt. We weren't just healing. We were remembering who we were before the world told us we were too much or not enough. And I made sure they knew. You are allowed to rise. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be both soft and wild. You are allowed to begin again as many times as it takes. Because I did. And Lord knows, if I can, so can they. It's a strange kind of peace. Sugar. The one that comes when you stop looking for what could have been and start loving what is. I used to think life was measured in milestones. Weddings, babies, anniversaries, job promotion. But now I know better. Now I believe a life well lived is made of moments. Quiet ones, small ones, overlooked by most folks. But stitched together, they make something beautiful. And Lord, after all I walked through, I don't need grand things anymore. I just need mornings with sunlight pouring through my kitchen window, the smell of coffee and rosemary, Sam humming some old hymn while he fiddles with the bird feeder. That's heaven enough for me. I've got a little journal I keep now, called the Small Joys Ledger. Every night before bed, I jot down 3 things that made me smile that day. Sometimes it's simple stuff. Mabel's peach cobbler came out perfect. Tessa read her poem out loud with her chin up. Sam kissed my shoulder while I was staring the soup. Other nights, it's quieter than that. I didn't flinch when I passed our old house. I sang in the shower again, first time in weeks. I looked in the mirror and liked what I saw. Because joy, I've learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just the absence of pain. Sometimes, it's the presence of yourself. I take walks every afternoon now. Down by the little creek past the library, there's a willow tree there that I've started calling Grace. She bends, but never breaks. She moves with the wind, not against it. I touch her bark when I pass by, and I whisper, thank you. Not sure who I'm thanking anymore. God, the tree, maybe just the part of me that didn't give up. Sam and I were not married. We talked about it once or twice, but I told him, plain and clear, I don't need a ring to know I'm loved. I just need truth, peace, and the freedom to keep being me. He smiled and said, then I'll give you that every day. And Lord, has he. Some nights we sit on the porch, drinking tea and watching the fireflies. He reads, I knit. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. But there's a comfort in the quiet, the kind I never knew in my first marriage. The kind where silence isn't the absence of love, it is the love. One night, out of nowhere, he said, if I go before you, I hope you write me a poem. I chuckled. If you go before me, I'm throwing a porch party in your honor. Sweet tea, cornbread, and your old records playing loud. He said, you wouldn't cry? And I said, oh, I'd cry plenty. But I'd cry with gratitude. 'Cause not everybody gets to feel this. Not even once. He reached over, took my hand, kissed the back of it. I hope you know you've saved more hearts than you'll ever realize. And maybe that's true, maybe not. But what I do know is this. I've lived. I've really lived. I've known betrayal that hollowed me out. And I've known love that filled me back up, slow and sacred. I've cried on bathroom floors and laughed in grocery aisles. I've planted seeds in broken soil and watched them bloom like miracles. I've told my story, heard others tell theirs, held their hands, held their hearts, and helped them walk through their own fire. That, to me, is a life well lived. Not because it was perfect, not because it was pain-free, but because I didn't let the pain be the end. You know, I once thought my story ended in that living room. The red dress, the lipstick, the betrayal. But now I know. That was just the end of a chapter, not the book. Because, baby, some stories don't need rewriting. They just need finishing. And Lord, I'm not done writing mine. Not yet. There comes a time, sugar, when you realize the purpose of your pain wasn't just to survive it, but to speak it out loud, with your shoulders straight and your heart wide open, so someone else can walk through theirs without feeling like they're walking alone. These days, I don't call myself a survivor. I call myself a witness, because I saw what it meant to lose everything I thought was true, and I lived to tell about it. That's a kind of sacred. I never set out to be anyone's teacher. I wasn't born wise. Lord knows, I spent years making myself small, staying quiet, waiting for love that came with conditions and silence. But God, in His mercy, gave me back my voice. And He didn't do it so I could whisper. He did it so I could guide. It started with notes. Little things I'd write and leave inside books at the library. You're allowed to start over. This hurt won't last forever. Even if no one's told you today, you're worth saving. Then came the letters. Women from other towns, other churches, even other states, finding my story online, hearing it through someone who'd been in one of my circles, and reaching out with the same question, whispered 100 different ways. How did you survive it? And my answer, every time, came like breath. I stopped trying to fix what broke me, and started building something new from what was left. They started asking me to speak. Little gatherings at first, church basements, support groups, retreats. I'd walk in, not as a hero, not as a preacher, just as Eleanor May, hair pulled back, cardigan sleeves rolled, heart wide open. And I'd begin the same way every time. I ain't here to tell you how to move on. I'm just here to remind you that you can. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they sat in silence. And sometimes, bless it, they laughed right through their tears when I told Em how I once baked a pie with so much rage. I forgot the sugar and fed it to the preacher anyway. Because wisdom, sugar, it don't always come dressed in scripture or stitched in perfect words. Sometimes it shows up in stories, in lived-in truths, in the crack of a voice that says, me too. And the older I get, the more I believe that wisdom ain't about having the answers. It's about holding space for the questions. At one retreat, a woman in her 50s stood up, hand trembling, and said, I forgave him, but I never forgave myself for stealing. I walked over to her, took both her hands in mine, and said, then let's do that right now. Let's stop punishing the woman who did the best she could with the love she had. She deserves a second chance too, and you're the only one who can give it to her. She wept into my shoulder like a child. And that, my sweet girl, was church. I kept a little notebook after that. Wrote down the truths I'd wish someone had told me when I was standing in the middle of my own ruin. Here are a few of them. Don't mistake silence for peace. Don't shrink to keep someone else comfortable. It's not your job to carry what broke you. You are not hard to love. You were just loved the wrong way. Grace doesn't mean going back. Sometimes it means walking on. And this one, my favorite. You don't owe your healing to the one who hurt you, but you do owe it to the woman inside you, begging for a life that feels like freedom. That's the kind of wisdom I share now. Not loud, not fancy, just true. Women started calling me Mama May. I didn't ask for it, they just started saying it. One said, you feel like the mama I never had. The one who tells the truth, even when it hurts, but always holds you while she does. And I reckon if I leave nothing else behind in this world, that's enough. Not a big house, not a fancy bank account, not even a perfect story. Just a trail of light behind me, a few lamps left, lit in the dark. A voice that whispers, you're not alone, baby. Keep going. I've been there too, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all looking for, ain't it? Someone to sit beside us in the storm, hand on our back, saying, I see you. I know this hurts, but I promise, you ain't done yet. If you're hearing my voice right now, baby, it means you made it to the end. And I need you to know that ain't nothing small. Because coming to the end of a story like mine, one soaked in betrayal, stitched back together with tears and silence and a whole lot of stubborn grace, it means you're still here. And Lord, there's power in that. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who told her story like this. I thought I'd grow old as somebody's wife, serving casseroles at church, quilting in the afternoons, talking about the good OL days like they were the only ones that mattered. But life had other plans. It handed me shame when I asked for safety. It handed me silence when I needed truth. It handed me grief wrapped in silk and laughter that didn't belong to me. And still, I lived. Not just in body, but in spirit, in voice, in fire. Because at some point, after the dress, after the door slammed behind me, after the porch nights with Mabel, and the Sunday garden talks with June, and the slow, deep love of a man who never asked me to change, I realized something simple and profound. I didn't need to be fixed. I just needed to be found. By myself and child. When I found her, the Eleanor that always existed under all the layers, she didn't come back loud. She came back whole. With laugh lines earned from survival, with a spine made of prayer and poetry, with a voice that didn't shake anymore when she said the words, I matter. Now, sitting here on my porch, the wind moving gentle through the wind chimes, Sam Redden on the swing beside me. I know I don't have forever, but I also know I don't need forever to leave behind something real. So, if this is the last thing you hear from me, let it be this. You do not need to explain the parts of your story that broke you. You only need to own the parts that rebuilt you. You do not need to go back and rewrite every chapter. You only need to keep turning the page. And you do not need to wait for someone to rescue you. Because, sugar, you are your own rescue. There will be days you forget that. Days when the past knocks at your door, we're in the same cologne. Days when grief sneaks in with the laundry, or hides in the back of your throat at the sound of a familiar song. Let it come. Let it pass. Let it remind you that you're human. But don't let it steal what you've earned. Because you didn't come this far just to survive. You came this far to shine. If I could reach through this page and place my hands on your cheeks like Mama used to do to me when I was a girl, I'd say, look at me, baby. You are not too much. You are not too late. And you are not too broken. You are still here. And that means you still get to choose. Choose peace. Choose your name. Choose your joy. Choose the kind of love that shows up without token anything from you. And when you're ready, when your story feels too heavy, come sit a while. On my porch, or in my memory, or right here in these words. I'll pour the tea. We'll talk. We'll cry if we need to. And then we'll keep going. Together. Thank you for listening to my story. If this touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you never miss a new story from another brave woman. Leave your comment down below. I read every single one with love and tenderness. And if there's another video showing up on your screen right now, I reckon you ought to click it, because another woman's truth might just be the next light you need on your own path. With all my love, Eleanor May Whitmore. A woman who lived, lost, and loved anyway.